My name is so goofy that please just call me John, because Father Dear just doesn't work. It's too, I know. And I've thought a lot about this because, you know, what to share or reflect with you. Because I figure you all know this. You've all been working for peace and reclaiming gospel nonviolence your whole life. So I'm just going to share some basic things that I thought, but we have time, especially there's like an hour before lunch, where you can ask me any questions, and I'm here all day and tomorrow with you. Happy to talk about anything, a lot of what I've been through with my own life, or what's happening in the States. Happy to get into all that. But we have this big title. Pat, you're pushing all my buttons. Reclaiming Gospel Nonviolence. So I thought, well, let's get into it. And I thought, well, how to approach that? Well, it's 3 questions. What happened? What is it we are reclaiming? And how the heck do we do that? Those are my simple questions. Maybe you all, know the answers. And really they're building on what David said last night. This evening there's a workshop, and what I'm going to do is pursue those questions with you more. I'm going to ask you about gospel nonviolence and Jesus, and I want to hear from you. That's what I'm going to do this evening. I would say it a little differently than David did last night. In a nutshell, I think the first 3 centuries, if you were a Christian, you were nonviolent. And I've been studying this for 40 years, full time. It's much worse than that, because they were really geniuses, the early group, the early gang. They were just Pax Christi, FOR, Catholic worker people. I'm trying to make you laugh here, and it's not working. The early church, except for St. Paul. If you are a citizen of the Roman Empire, the seal of Caesar was imprinted on your soul. You belonged to Caesar, who was God. And in the Emperor Diocletian in the year 90 announced that from now on Caesar is to be called my Lord and my God. You have the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, written in the year 70. John could have been written in the year 120. And he's ending it by saying, our guy is my Lord and my God. Well, the theology around by the year 100 was, if you were baptized, the seal of our guy is now imprinted on your soul. The politics of baptism, which meant you did not get baptism till like an hour before you were going to die. Did you know that? You all know all of this. I just find that just is so exciting, because that's saying Caesar is not God, our guy is. And by the way, we're not allowed to kill for you Romans anymore. We don't kill, because our guy is nonviolent. Well, then you have to be killed immediately upon the baptism, or the minute you publicly say, we're a follower of our guy. It's fantastic stuff. Well, we can't have that. And so I think it was not gradual, David, which was what I heard you say last night. There was this terrible moment, in my opinion. Was it 315 or 313? And didn't it happen right across the border here, where Constantine, the emperor, says, I'm a Christian. You can all be Christians and kill for me now. And everybody went, oh, thank God. Christianity was an illegal religion. Come right on in and have a seat. Christianity was illegal, and overnight it was legalized. And it was brilliant because it was spreading so fast throughout the empire, and suddenly he's got this network of dynamic people giving their lives for the empire. Overnight, the church kind of began to shift, and there were great saints here and there, of course, I'm sure, communities. But my take is they threw out the gospel. Literally the Sermon on the Mount. You don't have to follow this guy anymore on the question of empire and war. I know better, Constantine said. And he turned to the pagan Cicero. That's what happened as I studied history, which was the beginning of justified violence and mass murder for Jesus. And here we are 1,700 years later. It's incredible. They threw out the gospel, Pat. And if you read in like the 5th century or 4th century, St. Augustine, another guy I'm not very big on. He has a line in the City of God where it says, you know, really the best way to love your enemies is just to kill them. They really want to be killed for Jesus. I remember reading that when I was 21.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you don't want to hear that, Cornelius. Don't listen to it. It'll put your blood pressure. St. Augustine said, sometimes the best way to love your enemies is to kill them. Oh, God. See, I told you, it was to be a setback for Cornelius. So it's only natural that so you have the desert fathers and mothers in the 4th and 5th century fleeing. Why? In my opinion, to maintain nonviolence, the gospel of nonviolence. Don't get me started on Bernard, Benedict. I mean, they were trying so well to create communities of prayer and service, but they were all for war. And it's only natural that by the Middle Ages, you had churchmen, leaders. They were not just organizing crusades. The cardinals led the crusades. What Francis was up against is incredible, you know? And I remember my friend, the Franciscan priest Richard Rohr, was telling me years ago, yeah, when Francis, he walked through 1 foot of blood and body parts for 7 months before he got to the Sultan. And he meets the Sultan, and the Sultan's going, now we're getting somewhere. This guy's beautiful. Because he's just talking nonviolence. Everything about Francis is nonviolence. But it was when he turned around, Francis, and went back, it was the church leaders tried to kill him. And then I think when he got home, Francis was kicked out of the order because of nonviolence. You know, that's why he fled to the mountain. He was out. We don't want that. We want to be Jesuits and build buildings. I'm still trying to make you laugh, and it's not working here. And then, you know, churchmen burning women at the stake, white churchmen owning slaves. It's just normal. If you have nothing to do with nonviolence, then what the heck are we doing? We're servants of the empire in some kind of crazy cult. But there were always pockets of nonviolence. And the interesting thing, and you all study this more than we do, the lineage of nonviolence. I don't know, the Mennonites, the Baptists, you Quakers from 300 years ago leading the abolitionist movement here in Britain, heroes, incredible. The abolitionists are totally key to the salvation of the world, in my opinion, because not only did they work to end the historic slavery, but they kept alive gospel nonviolence, most of them. And that led to the suffragettes. Critical, because the women were not allowed to speak at the abolition movement. And they had gotten the spirit of Jesus. And that, in the States, it led to the labor movement. And, well, the lineage is so incredible. The abolitionists, the son of the number 2 abolitionist in the United States, Adin Ballot, wrote to Tolstoy, did you know this, in 1870, and sent his father's 25-page vision statement on nonviolence to Tolstoy, and Tolstoy converted and wrote about nonviolence till the day he died because of that lineage. And then Tolstoy's connected to some goofy guy in South Africa named Mohandas, and gets the letter and turns to his assistant and says, this is the most important person in the world. And the Tolstoyans flee Russia after the revolution and go to Canada and invite this crazy, wild American anarchist woman to give them a retreat, Dorothy Day, who was a secretary for FOR in 1928. I mean, the lineage is amazing. and Gandhi getting involved in FOR, and then all of this leading to Martin Luther King. We're part of this lineage, but we're in an incredible historic moment about reclaiming gospel nonviolence. The moment is twofold. We are headed toward total global destruction. But never before in 1700 years have so many people begun to wake up to gospel nonviolence. And Pat and I are working with the Vatican. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Don't put that on YouTube. I never in my life imagined such a thing. Helping the Vatican write the World Day of Peace message called Nonviolence, which came out January 1st this year, the first statement on nonviolence in the history of the Catholic Church. Isn't that fantastic news? And working with the Pope on maybe having an encyclical on nonviolence within the next 2 years. And we're pushing to say that's the end of the just war theory. Well, Francis could be assassinated over that, if we get that close. I was saying to, Joan Chittister and other friends, and they were like, the ordination of women is coming before that because that's nothing compared to getting rid of the just war theory. I'm still trying to make you laugh. I thought that was pretty fun because you see what I mean? How central this is not just an idea. The just war theory is in the Catechism. It's a requirement of faith. You have to kill for your country. Forget Jesus. It's in canon law. I mean, all of this will change the dynamic. And if this happens, friends, we have a moment, a teachable moment, a kairos moment. And I invite you to get ready with us for the next couple of years, if we're able to get Francis to pull this off. Right, Pat? And maybe I hope at some point today, Pat, or tomorrow, you will tell us a little bit more about that, because she's really involved. So, but the flip side, you all know this. 16,000 nuclear weapons good to go. 35 wars happening today. United States waging 7 wars today. I mean, full-on war. Bombing people this morning. The United Nations says 800 million people are starving to death. The United Nations says 8 human beings have more money than the poorest bottom half of humanity, 3.6 billion people. And we could go with those statistics and all, and talk about half the human race living under $2 a day, no water, food, housing, healthcare, education, jobs, dignity. But this is corporate greed, structured racism, institutionalized hatred, oppression. It's beyond empire now. Total surveillance of every human being on the planet. Something the Romans could never imagine, the Nazis could never imagine. Heading toward the total destruction of the planet. Catastrophic climate change. I've just written a book on nonviolence and the environment and how that's connected. I've been really studying it. It's so scary. Can I just say a word to totally depress you about Donald Trump, who I thought was golfing down the road. He might be here today in Aberdeen. I was so happy to come to Scotland just to get away from the U.S. and now he may be golfing 20 miles away. Listen, no, I'm going to be serious here for a second. Don't be naive. You could say, oh man, this guy is a real egomaniac. No, he is not. He's a very, very sick person. He's a classic narcissistic sociopath. A narcissist is obsessed with yourself, sick. It's a pathological condition. And a sociopath, like the Nazis, but like some, have no sense of the feelings of suffering people. Like you can't even imagine. But Donald Trump is just a symptom. He is a symbol. The United States is no longer a democracy. This is very clear to me and my friends. We have moved into a whole new kind of fascism. Now, some friends, maybe Lucas would say that's always been the case, but in my mind, we have a coup and you kill John Kennedy, and the government has to kill Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, then it's normal, then we can get to go on and kill 3 million people in Indochina. And we have Nixon and Ronald Reagan, and to just follow Bush to Clinton to George W. Bush killing. My math says up to 3 million people in Iraq, and so forth and so on. I mean, Barack Obama went way beyond George W. Bush with extrajudicial assassinations and had it down to a science. I live in the desert of New Mexico, in the shadow of Los Alamos, this mountain. I look out at it every day, the birthplace of the atomic bomb. And Obama rebuilt it with $4 billion. Bush couldn't have, but with Donald Trump, we're entering the normal trajectory of a corporate state. It's sort of beyond oligarchy. It's a new thing. It's total global domination and destruction of life. This is what we're up against. And that's why this work of organizing peace and justice is critically important in FOR and Pax Christi. But the deeper theological and spiritual questions, which you and I are interested, reclaiming gospel nonviolence, and why the grassroots movement and getting Francis's leadership, while we have the most progressive pope perhaps in history for a short time to lead us, all of us, because it'll affect the whole world. So this is what we're up against. And I could go on and on about this. You know, you've read so much about it, from expelling Muslims, immigrants, the shootings of African American unarmed people, mass incarceration, how the states are changing. But I just wanted to say, don't be fooled. You know, it's very, very serious. And I know you have issues here. As I've been coming to Scotland, I think the key question, in my opinion, just as an outsider, is the existence of nuclear weapons here. And that's the measure of your movement and resistance, is getting rid of them. And I know you're working on that. And I'm excited to hear about what's happening in London today. So things are really bad, and there's this movement of hope, which we are part of. Well, what is it we are reclaiming, if you're hanging in here with me, this gospel nonviolence? And I have been, as Pat knows, talking about this, following the nonviolent Jesus, every single day of my life since 1982, which meant every single day of my life somebody is saying to me, oh, can't we kill? Can't we kill somebody? No. But the flip side, what I keep reflecting, and I think Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King have explained everything to us. And when in doubt, keep going back and studying these mythic visionaries that we don't deserve. You know, that we are living in their era is such a blessing. Of course, Dorothy Day up to Romero and Thich Nhat Hanh and Tutu, so many great people. But Gandhi and Dr. King are, you know, some of the greatest people who ever lived. And Dr. King said the night before the government killed him, his last words, if you read the speech in Memphis, just before he said, I've been to the mountaintop, the choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. It's nonviolence or non-existence. That's what we're living through. Gandhi said the same thing about a month before he was killed. Nonviolence or non-existence. It's not violence or nonviolence. The United States will destroy the planet. This is what the plan is. Dick Cheney said everything is headed toward the Great War with China. So we want climate change to get it ready. It was very, very serious. That's why this is life and death, what we're talking about. Well, the longer I reflect on nonviolence, Pat, I hope you're sitting down. I don't know if this is helpful. That's why you can tell me these absolute words. But I think it is total nonviolence. Universal nonviolence. That's what we're talking about. It's beyond our own comprehension. We haven't really begun a true theology or spirituality of nonviolence. What are we reclaiming? We are practitioners of gospel violence, gospel war making. That's what the churches are about for the last 1,700 years. And you and I are experts at this. And the priests and ministers and the bishops. and I can give you details. The Archbishop of New Mexico, he just stepped down recently. He's practically an employee of Los Alamos, blessing the atomic bombs. And he banned our Pax Christi vigils. He banned me from praying publicly for peace. It backfired on him because we have an annual Hiroshima Day peace vigil, and all hundreds of Pax Christi people went up the mountain, and the press said, "Where's Father John?" And they said, "Well, the Archbishop has forbidden him to pray for peace." So it was a headline in the state newspaper, "Archbishop forbids priest to pray for peace." Crazy! Has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But I'm saying we have to go beyond Gandhi and Dr. King into a vision and spirituality and theology and practice of total nonviolence, universal nonviolence. The words love, peace, compassion, to my mind, don't work. Everybody at Los Alamos is for peace. Everybody at the Pentagon loves one another. Karen Armstrong's idea of compassionate cities does not work. So in the United States, that's what, but nonviolence, this clumsy word. So we have to define it and talk about it. And I urge you to use the word to the day you die and keep talking about it. So what does it mean for you? So here's some of my definitions, and then we'll look at Jesus' nonviolence. And maybe all I can offer you, because you've all been at this all your lives, is just to get, by me talking about this like this, I want to encourage you and inspire you to figure out your own way of talking about this for the rest of your lives. To talk about nonviolence and the nonviolent Jesus. This is as we organize and vigil and do what we can. For me, nonviolence is a vision of the heart that sees, the key to the whole thing is every human being on the planet is your very sister and brother. We're all one. And you got the whole reason of prayer and life together and community and communion and church is to go deeper into the spiritual truth of reality that you are one with every human being is equal to your blood brother and sister, all 7.2 billion people. You see, I've been drinking coffee all morning, so it's gonna be rough. And the older and wiser you get, you go deeper into the truth of reality, the spiritual vision, you realize you're one with the creatures and the earth and creation. And it's so fantastic. Thomas Merton had that brilliant line with his revelation in Louisville that the real problem is if we all woke up and did this, we'd all like fall down and worship one another and we'd get no work done. I'm still trying to make you laugh here. Isn't that great? You see where he means. But if you go deep into the core truth of nonviolence, you can never hurt anybody or kill anybody. It's your brother and sister. It's a child of God. Or sit back and be silent when there are 35 wars, 16,000 nuclear weapons, billions in poverty, catastrophic climate change. So there's nothing passive about nonviolence. It is an activist life. And it is a way of life, and it's a spiritual path, and it's a methodology of social change. Are you sitting down? That always works if you try it. But the key is you have to be willing to give your life. That's the bottom line. That's why we don't really practice it the way Gandhi and Dr. King taught. And not to mention Jesus. You see, I'm a big name dropper. So it's active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity, persistently reconciling with every human being on the planet, standing up publicly and saying no and resisting the structures, systems, and institutions of violence that are killing our sisters and brothers around the planet. Everything, war, racism, poverty, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction. No, no, no. Resisting it, non-cooperating with it. Giving our lives to stop the killing, and on the flip side, practicing unconditional, non-retaliatory, all-inclusive, universal love. With one catch. And I want you to talk about this in your churches. There is no cause however noble, no matter what anyone ever says to us for the rest of our life, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human being's life. We do not kill ever again. The days of killing are over. We don't kill people who kill people to show that you shouldn't kill people. Or bomb an entire country because in order to bring about democracy. This is the lie. It's insanity, folks. It's actual insanity. Nonviolence is sanity, reasonableness. But this is a real bottom line because it's the same as alcoholism. The whole world now is addicted to violence, addicted to war. But really what we're talking about in biblical language is death as a social methodology. We are addicted to death. We bring good people to death. Death with a capital D, as the poet Auden said. It's a very powerful way to understand. So it's actually beyond Donald Trump. It's this system and forces of violence. And like every addiction, nonviolence draws a boundary line. You do not drink. And you turn to your higher power. You make restitution. You do your steps. We are a meeting of Violence Anonymous today. That's what the church is really supposed to be, every parish. And you bring in a speaker and go, hi, I'm John, I'm addicted to violence. Hi, John. Making restitution, telling you my journey to nonviolence. I'm giving up violence. But it's a lifelong journey to sobriety, and I'm turning to my higher power. I'm trying to make you laugh here, and it's just not working. But do you agree? I find this helpful. I don't know if you did. Well, so in my experience, including with Pax Christi and FOR in the States, when push comes to shove, though, you say, actually, we better kill Saddam. No, we really got to hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden. But can't we just kill somebody? No, no, no. You and I have to be missionaries of nonviolence to the world, certainly to Scotland. That's what you're being charged with today. To say the days of killing and violence and war are over. The church has nothing to do with that anymore. This is a good thing to do with the rest of our lives in such a time. We will not live to see the outcome, but we are sowing seeds. That's very exciting. Well, trying to figure this out, I wrote this book called The Nonviolent Life, and see what you think about this. How to explain nonviolence in very ordinary terms, but the big holistic nonviolence of Mahatma Gandhi. So I came up with this thesis. See what you think of this. Nonviolence requires 3 simultaneous attributes. You have to do all 3. And we don't want to do all 3. We want to do one of them. Maybe some of us might even do 2. But Gandhi and Dr. King did all 3. Number 1, you have to be really nonviolent to yourself for the rest of your life. Well, we could spend the whole weekend talking about that. In the U.S., we are wounded people, everyone. We are all experts at violence, but we're all victims of violence. And it's the same with you, I submit, because the world is so sick now. What happened to you? Your childhood, your parents, how did they hurt you, your brothers and sisters in school? Or how were you a victim of racism or sexism or the culture of war, which has framed you, and you have internalized violence, but as people of nonviolence, we are going to non-cooperate with our own inner violence. Isn't that lovely? We're going to, well, I don't even know what this means, cultivate interior nonviolence. Make peace with yourself. Create a space within you where the God of peace can live peacefully. Lovely things. Hard work. While you're doing that, and I could talk a lot more about that, number 2, at the same time, you have to practice meticulous nonviolence toward every human being on the planet and all the creatures and the earth itself. How's that going for you? And we're a peace conference because, I don't care, but deep down, there's at least one person you'd like to get back at with a little revenge. Maybe just a little, not mass murder, but something, we hope. One can hope. That person who pushes your buttons, who you hate, is your teacher of nonviolence. Because that person is exposing your violence. No, we're FOR. I'm sorry. No. How do you work out reconciliation with that person? Have you studied the methodology of nonviolent conflict resolution? How do you, we have to train ourselves, that's what this movement is about, so that in extreme instances of the threat of personal assault, we can begin to respond instinctively through the creative power of nonviolence. And nonviolence is infinitely creative. Violence is totally boring. Just kill them. But we get to practice this with the difficult people in our lives, in our families, in the churches, in our workplace. And we're constantly working on ourselves so that we can become ordinary people of meticulous interpersonal nonviolence. I could go on about the creatures too, what you wear, what you eat, and Earth. It's normal in a world of total violence that you're going to have catastrophic climate change. Who cares? We're disconnected from the Earth. You here in Scotland are way ahead of us in the States, as you well know. But there's issues here too, you know, and how can you lead the way? And I know a lot, you've got a strong environmental movement, but make the connection between nonviolence and the Earth. But the third thing, at the same time, nonviolence to yourself, nonviolence to all others, the third, you have to be part of the global grassroots movement of nonviolence that's changing the world. Now I say that because in the States at least, people are really good at one, maybe two of these things. Most of the church people in the United States are really nice. At least they think they are. Like, I'm going to be really peaceful with myself and my family. I'm sorry, I don't think that's Christianity. That's like presumed. They're not doing anything to end war, starvation, racism, destruction of the earth. You see what I mean? The flip side of us is there's those of us who are really in the movement. And we're mad and angry because we're for peace. And not nonviolent to ourselves and not nonviolent to the people around us. And that's my problem. I'm a hardcore activist and I'm trained that way. I understand it. Gandhi and Martin Luther King were teaching a holistic way of life and a vision and a practice and a methodology. Self, all others, creation, and be part of the movement. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of you for all you do for peace and justice, and I want to encourage you. But if you're not part of the movement, get involved. Pick a cause and get involved. The way change happens historically from Jesus to Martin Luther King is bottom-up, grassroots movement building, period. Power never gives itself over unless the movement demands it. And that's why the abolitionists are key historically, especially here in Britain, to understand what we are facing today. For me, that's meant I work with, we started a group in the States called Campaign Nonviolence, a movement, as a tool. And maybe you want to try this here. You can look it up, campaignonviolence.org. We just picked the third week of September, around International Peace Day, September 21st. This is going to be our fourth year. We're going to have 1,000 public demonstrations covering the entire country, all 50 states. As of this morning, we have 560 registered. It's incredible. And we're against everything. And our motto is connecting the dots, because we're all just working, I'm working on my thing, refugees. Well, refugees is about the environment and poverty and corporate greed and racism and nuclear weapons. It's all one. You have to connect the dots now. Everything has changed. Gandhi was doing that already. But we have to grow up and not only become like Gandhi and Dr. King, we have to go beyond them. But we're also asking all our people around the country to also be for the coming of a new culture of peace and nonviolence, as Dr. King envisioned. Isn't that great? And you might, maybe that's a tool, an organizing tool you might want to be, you could look up and organize something in Scotland if you want. I know folks in Edinburgh are going to do that. The other project that I've launched is called the Nonviolent Cities Project. And this is based, I was speaking in a little town called Carbondale, Illinois. And I found out that all the activists said after decades, nothing is happening. So we've launched Nonviolent Carbondale. And I said, excuse me, what? They said, we want to know, where are we going? Well, the vision is that the whole city would become nonviolent. So we have to get out of our activist circles. So we started having our activist meetings in the city council, which was very upsetting to the elected politicians. Have these activists show up. Well, they said to the politicians, the point is a nonviolent city. Well, then, of course, they had to start meeting with the police. The white police are going to shoot unarmed African American. That has to stop. Well, then you have to deal with the gun trade in the city and the local military place. And by the way, in the poorer sections, people are hungry and don't have health care. And they're dealing with education, the whole city. And the city is changing. And we went, that's a good model. So I now have 50 cities in the States where the activists are working. So this is local organizing. You might try this in Scotland. What would a nonviolent Edinburgh look like? A nonviolent Glasgow, nonviolent London, nonviolent Scotland? Well, first of all, you got to get rid of those nukes. I'm sorry to keep bringing this up. This is all nice and we're having a nice time, but there's nuclear weapons down the road. That's a spiritual issue and it has to be dealt with if you're people reclaiming nonviolence. So I could go on about other projects, but so for me, as Pat said, you know, this is all lovely and good, but you know, I was the director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation in the United States, and you can read about this in the books, but I met like tens of thousands of activists, and I learned that nonviolence is the center of every religion. I learned that from people, not from reading it in the books. I read it in the books, but I know hundreds of Muslims who are telling me, nonviolence is Islam. I'm going, that's not what George W. Bush said. I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I know hundreds of Jews radically committed to nonviolence because of the prophet says someday they're going to beat swords into plowshares and never study war again. These oracles of nonviolence. Hinduism is practically embodied by Gandhi. And don't get me started on these Buddhists. I work with Buddhists all over the United States, and I've been very blessed to know Thich Nhat Hanh for many years, my friend and teacher who's so sick now. He really is like that. That we're going to practice nonviolence toward all sentient beings. No, let's not stop there. We're going to be nonviolence to the air, the earth, the rocks, the water, the sky. Live in the present moment of peace, infinite compassion. But what you and I are saying today, and this is going to be rough, I hope you're sitting down. Even Christianity is about nonviolence. Even Roman Catholicism, dare I say, the Methodist Church, the Church of Scotland. Why are you laughing? That should be like, oh yes, of course, John. No, we are going to reclaim all of that. And my favorite, the basis, the only way this works is because of Jesus, period, in my opinion. Mahatma Gandhi comes along and says, Jesus is the greatest person of nonviolence in the history of the world. And then the poor guy goes, and the only people on the whole planet who don't know that Jesus is nonviolent are Christians. Is he right or is he wrong? This is the critical question. Now, there was a famous Jesuit theologian in the United States, one of the first great biblical scholars. He wrote a book in 1960 that said, or it was a little bit later, and he was getting this from Martin Luther King. Martin doesn't have time to begin to unpack a theology and spirituality of nonviolence. This guy said, if Gandhi and Dr. King are right, and I'm studying it in the Greek, he then said, it's the only thing you can say for sure about Jesus of Nazareth is that he's nonviolent. Now that's powerful teaching. And this is what Pat and I are trying to say to the Vatican. And what's so shocking is we're hearing them saying, yeah, the just war theory is over. We're going to start proclaiming to the world the nonviolence of Jesus. I think I'm talking to the 30 or 35 of us in this room that if we spent the rest of our lives teaching the nonviolence of Jesus, that the gospel is about nonviolence, and we model it, that is a good thing to do for the rest of our lives. We will sow seeds that could change the world. And your mission is to do that in Scotland. Is Gandhi right? Was Jesus violent or nonviolent? If he's violent, who the heck cares about him then? I mean, we don't need him. Anybody can do it. If this guy is the incarnation of nonviolence, now we're getting somewhere. This is very cool. And as I get old and grouchy, as you see, I'm 58, the church gets more problematic and worse than ever. And Jesus gets even greater than ever. He's like, oh, he's so spectacular. All his teachings are nonviolence. I wrote, my new book is called The Beatitudes of Peace. It's about the Sermon on the Mount. And did you know that Gandhi, got up at 4 in the morning for 1 hour of meditation in the ashram every day, and at 5 o'clock every evening for 1 hour of meditation with the community. Remember in the movie, he was 2 minutes late for the 5 o'clock meditation. He was assassinated, walked up. Every morning, every evening, for the last 45 years of his life, until the last second of his life, he read from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. He said it's the greatest teachings of nonviolence in the history of the world. I want to be a person of nonviolence. I have to read my textbook. This is the handbook, how to be a person of nonviolence, how to be a human being. Do you do that? Aren't you all Christians? This guy, Gandhi, wasn't even a Christian. Isn't that fantastic? So that's what I wrote in this book, and I've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount nonstop for the last 10 years. The teachings are just so spectacular. They're there. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. You have heard it say, thou shalt not kill. I say, don't even get angry. And we're like, excuse me, Jesus? No, look, you see, we're modern, sophisticated people. Anger is a neutral emotion which we can use for the good. No. It's just part of your woundedness and and sowing the seeds of violence that lead to murder, which leads to war. The fifth antithesis. Tolstoy spent the last 25 years of his life on those sentences. You have heard an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, in the Greek, offer no antistene. Offer no violent resistance to one who does violence to you. That's the commandment. Could Jesus have been any more clearer? And he says, and he's teaching this ragtag group on the outskirts of the empire. We're all getting killed. The troops are coming in and burning their homes and killing the babies and raping the women and stealing their stuff and making the men join the Roman Empire. And this guy is forming a movement, teaching them the methodology of nonviolence. And he gives examples. First one being when someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek. You all know this, right? Walter Wink's teachings. Never been taught before that, if I go to strike, it's Robin, right? If I go to strike you, my fist is going to land where? On your left cheek. It's not possible to strike someone on the right cheek, but the actual teaching, this is what Gandhi read every morning, every evening for 45 years, and he's figuring it out. This verse, like Tolstoy. What the heck is Jesus talking about? The person is kneeling down. I'm the Roman soldier. It's the back of the hand, top-down oppression. And if you, the nonviolent resistor, turn the other cheek, you're saying, I'm equal to you. I'm a human being. You can't oppress me top-down. This is powerful, exciting. This is liberation, but it's scary. You have to engage the violent oppressor. The methodology of nonviolence, the world always says that there's two things you can do in the face of violence. Respond with violence or run away and do nothing. And Jesus comes through and offers the third way, active nonviolent resistance, engaging your opponent, disarming them until the scales fall from your eyes, you recognize you're human beings, and you live in peace happily ever after. And Gandhi comes along and is going to apply this globally as a method of ending war and oppression and injustice. Fantastic. Well, Jesus has this great gig going, nice little peace movement, and wrecks the whole thing by turning and marching to Jerusalem. He thinks he's Gandhi. Jesus thinks, I'm trying to make you laugh. He thinks he's Martin Luther King. And he's marching to Jerusalem on a campaign of nonviolence, and he goes into the temple where the religious authorities are working with the empire to steal all the people's money in the name of God, and he turns over the tables. I mean, it's active, direct, nonviolent civil disobedience. It's in your face, totally illegal, provocative, troublemaking. This is the guy we follow. Just to clarify, especially for YouTube, he doesn't hit anybody, hurt anybody, kill anybody, or drop any nuclear bombs. This guy is not passive. If we had more time, I wanted to read, we don't, but I wanted to read to you Luke 10, which to me is now my favorite passage, and maybe we could talk about it before lunch. He takes the 72 and he sends them out in pairs. And he says, I am sending you as lambs into the midst of wolves. Think about that image. That's one of the most incredible lines of nonviolence ever. That's you and I. We're not wolves going in the midst of wolves. We're lambs going in the midst of wolves, which means we're going to be eaten alive. And he says you have, well, it's always three jobs. You heal people of violence. You expel the demons of violence. We're all infatuated with Britain, the bomb, Trump, nation states, baloney. And the third thing, you announce the kingdom of God. Gandhi has the most incredible line. Lucas, I was telling Jim Lawson about this on the phone recently. We were both kind of freaking out. This is Gandhi. The kingdom of God is nonviolence. Isn't that fantastic? Of course it is. God is pure we're talking total nonviolence. So I'm talking this way in this church, and forgive me if you've heard this story. It was like 2004. There were 1,000 people. I'm denouncing the war in Iraq. I don't even remember where it was in the States. And then there's questions, and this very sweet little old lady stood up and said, oh, John, this is so interesting what you're talking about. I've never heard about nonviolence. It's really intriguing. And then she said, and peace, me, peace, big fan of peace. But John, sometimes you just got to kill somebody. The church was right to throw out the Sermon on the Mount and set up the just war theory. It's not, by the way, in the text. The sixth antithesis. You have heard it said, hate your countrymen, but I say, thank you. Love your enemies. Jesus doesn't say, though, if they're really, really bad and you follow these 7 conditions, bomb the hell out of them. If that's what you think, go to what happens next in the story. My body broken for you, my blood shed for you. What he should have said is, go break their bodies for me. Go shed their blood for me. That's the logic of violence. No. Every time you participate in communion or Eucharist, you come to church, you are entering into the new covenant of nonviolence. My body broken for you, my blood shed for you. Do this. They're in the Garden of Gethsemane. Here come the soldiers. St. Peter's thinking, oh my God, they're going to get our guy. I got to protect him. And St. Peter's thinking, if there's ever a just war in all of human history, if violence is ever divinely sanctioned, if there ever was a moment to kill, it's now in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's right. He's right. We got to kill to protect our guy. The Holy One's in trouble. And just as Peter goes to kill, the commandment comes down, put down the sword. Those are the last words of Jesus to the church before he died. It's the last thing they heard him say. And it's the first time they realized how serious he was about nonviolence. And what do? They all run away from him. You and I are deciding today not to run away from Jesus and to teach active nonviolence and to reclaim gospel nonviolence. He goes to his death in meticulous nonviolence, and he comes back and risen, still nonviolent. He doesn't say, Peter, go venge my death. Or he's not angry at Peter. He says, sweet and gentle. He makes breakfast with these guys, which I think is a little over the top with the nonviolence. And he says, peace be with you. Now you go on a campaign of nonviolence into the world. That's our mission. That's what you've been doing all your lives, and that's what we have to do. I'll talk more about this later, but I encourage you to be students and teachers of gospel nonviolence and to talk about the nonviolence of Jesus till the day you die. And this word that Grace used last night, which we've been using in the States nonstop, we want to take nonviolence into the mainstream, to make it normal for every church. That if you come into this community, you have nothing to do with violence or war anymore. You don't have a gun. You don't build nuclear weapons. We're rejecting sexism and racism and every kind of prejudice. We're welcoming everyone, and we're going to be lambs in the midst of wolves until everybody reclaims their lamb nature, their true nonviolent nature. And we're proclaiming the coming of a new world of nonviolence, which means no more war, no more killing, no more weapons, no more racism, no more sexism, no more corporate greed, no more environmental destruction. The kingdom of God is at hand. This is our mission, like the 72 who were sent forth, to reclaim gospel nonviolence and to make it the norm. So I really thank you for doing that, and I encourage you to carry on till the day we die. Thanks for listening, everybody.